In the alleyways of Los Angeles, in the shadows of Central American barrios, a name strikes fear: Mara Salvatrucha, or MS-13. What began as a small immigrant gang in the 1980s has become one of the most violent and feared organizations in the United States. Known for their brutality, loyalty, and their tattoos that tell stories of death and belonging, MS-13 is more than a gang. They are a transnational criminal organization with ties to drug trafficking, human smuggling, and extortion, stretching from El Salvador to New York City. For decades, the FBI has waged war against them. But every time authorities strike, the gang adapts, recruiting younger soldiers and spilling more blood. This is the story of MS-13's drug war in America, a war that has destroyed communities, fueled cartel profits, and tested the limits of U.S. law enforcement. The roots of MS-13 go back to the early 1980s. El Salvador was at war. Civilians fled the violence, seeking refuge in the United States. Many settled in Los Angeles, where they faced poverty, discrimination, and rival gangs. Young Salvadorans banded together for protection. They called themselves Mara Salvatrucha, a name combining Mara, meaning gang, and Trucha, slang for alert or sharp. At first, MS-13 was small, just a survival gang. But over time, they grew bolder, embracing extreme violence as their weapon of choice. Tattoos became their uniform, machetes their tool of terror, and their reputation spread quickly. MS-13 members wore their identity on their skin. Full facial tattoos marked their loyalty. A spider web, devil horns, or the letters MS became symbols of both fear and belonging. But tattoos were more than ink. They were a declaration of war on rivals and society itself. Once marked, there was no turning back. The gang's code was simple: loyalty above all. Betrayal was punished with death. Respect was earned through violence, and power was built on controlling the streets. By the late 1980s, 13 had become a force in Los Angeles, and soon, their influence would spread far beyond. The rise of MS-13 coincided with the explosion of cocaine and crack in the United States. Colombian and Mexican cartels sought distributors on the ground. MS-13 was ready. They began working as foot soldiers in the drug trade, selling cocaine, marijuana, and later methamphetamine in U.S. neighborhoods. Their brutality made them reliable enforcers. In Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and New York, MS-13 established drug corners. They taxed street-level dealers, executed rivals, and expanded their territory block by block. The profits fueled growth. Money flowed back to El Salvador, funding weapons and recruitment. What began as a street gang was quickly becoming an international network. 13 was not alone in the streets. They clashed with Barrio 18, Bloods, Crips, and other Latino gangs. The wars were merciless. Drive-by shootings, machete attacks, and public executions left bodies in alleyways and headlines in newspapers. Innocent bystanders were often caught in the crossfire. The FBI called MS-13 one of the most dangerous gangs in America. Their willingness to kill without hesitation set them apart. For MS-13, violence was not just a means to an end, it was their language. By the 2000s, the FBI launched major operations to dismantle MS-13. Under the RICO Act, hundreds of members were indicted. Task forces were formed in multiple states. Operation Community Shield became one of the FBI's largest anti-gang campaigns. Raids in Los Angeles, Long Island, and Maryland led to mass arrests. But each time the FBI struck, MS-13 adapted. Leaders were deported to El Salvador, where they rebuilt the gang stronger than before. The war was now fought on two fronts, in U.S. cities and in Central American prisons. In El Salvador and the U.S., prisons became MS-13's command centers. Leaders issued orders from behind bars, directing hits, drug sales, and extortion schemes. Entire cell blocks were controlled by MS-13. Guards were intimidated. Informants were silenced. From prison phones, coded messages traveled thousands of miles, turning American streets into battlegrounds. The FBI realized that locking them up was not enough. Prison only made MS-13 stronger. By the 2010s, MS-13 was no longer confined to inner cities. They spread into suburban America, Long Island, Virginia, Maryland. Communities were shocked. Quiet neighborhoods saw teenagers executed in wooded areas. High school students were recruited into the gang. Parents lived in fear that their children would be the next victim, or the next recruit. The drug trade followed. MS-13 pushed heroin, fentanyl, and meth into middle-class communities. The violence was no longer far away, it was right at the doorstep. 1013 strengthened their ties with Mexican cartels, especially Sinaloa and CJNG. They became trusted distributors and enforcers inside the United States. The cartels supplied the drugs, MS-13 provided the soldiers. This partnership meant more money, more weapons, and more bloodshed. The FBI described it as a narco-military alliance, cartels outsourcing violence to gangs like MS-13, while MS-13 expanded their drug empire deeper into U.S. soil. Like all criminal empires, MS-13 faced betrayal from within. Members flipped, becoming FBI informants. Wiretaps revealed murder plots, extortion rings, and international money laundering. Massive indictments followed. Dozens of leaders were sentenced to life in prison. Some safe houses were seized. Millions in cartel cash was confiscated. But every victory came with a price. For every leader taken down, dozens of young recruits filled the gap. The FBI could cut off heads, but the beast lived on. Today, MS-13 remains one of the most violent gangs in the United States. Their tattoos still mark their soldiers. Their drug trade still poisons communities. Their violence still makes headlines. The FBI has weakened them, but not destroyed them. As long as poverty, immigration struggles, and cartel alliances continue, MS-13 will survive. The legacy of Mara Salvatrucha is written in blood. From Los Angeles to Long Island, from El Salvador to Washington, D.C., their war is far from over. 1013's story is not just about drugs and violence. It is about desperation, poverty, and survival. But it is also about the cost America has paid in lives lost, families broken, and communities scarred. The FBI continues to fight, parents continue to fear. And somewhere tonight, a young recruit is being drawn into the Mara, sealing his fate with ink, blood, and loyalty. The war against MS-13 is not finished. It is only the latest chapter in America's endless battle against organized crime.